Some people ask if this is a significant tax reform, and it is, because the last time we had major tax reform in the U.S. was in 1986 in the Reagan administration, and the last time we had major international tax reform was 55 years ago during the Kennedy administration. So this is a wholesale change. Two of the most significant changes: first is a dramatic drop in the rate from 35% federal corporate rate to 21%. That's a 40% decrease. That impacts everybody, American companies doing business, also foreign companies doing business in the U.S. The second major change is that we went from arguably a worldwide system to a territorial system, but it's a more limited territorial, and that is we only exempt dividends. Now, for the privilege of exempting dividends, what happens is all the historical earnings after 1986 are subject to a one-time tax at a reduced rate of either 15.5% or 8%, depending whether those earnings are in cash or cash equivalents, or if it's not in cash equivalents, the assumption is it hasn't been invested, in say property, plant, and equipment. And then also for the future, all those earnings are subject to what some people call a minimum tax of 10.5% in the U.S. So the big change is when you bring profits back from an overseas subsidiary to the U.S., those dividends will now be tax-free, but there's a price to pay, and that price is that the historical earnings are taxed, and also the future earnings are taxed at 10.5% under the GILTI provision. The other changes are also significant, and they impact both foreign companies doing business in the U.S. as well as U.S. companies doing business overseas. So first is the introduction of limitations on the deduction of interest expense. Right now, the limitation is only for related party interest expense, where the withholding rate is reduced to nil under a tax treaty. Now it will apply to all interest expense, both related and unrelated. That, along with the drop in the corporate rate, will make the cost of financing in the U.S. probably more expensive. The other significant change is that for investments in tangible assets, you'll be able to write that off all right up front. And so I think that will have a favorable cash flow impact on making investments in American plant and equipment. The other changes is a change in what we call foreign derived intangible income. If you export or if you provide services in America for property located outside, that income tax is taxed not at 21%, but at around the 13%. And then lastly, a provision you may have heard of called BEAT, Base Erosion and Profit Shifting, or Base Erosion Anti-Abuse Tax. This BEAT is sort of our equivalent of BEPS, Base Erosion and Profit Shifting. And what it says is that if you have significant, what I'll call outbound payments from America to 25% related parties, other than cost of goods sold, and other than certain services with very little markup, then you may have to pay an extra BEAT tax. There are a lot of other provisions, I think, that could have an impact on your businesses, but I think those are the major provisions.